Aloha, everybody. Michelle Melendez. Welcome to Global Inner Wellness, where we're helping you feel good in your body and safe in the world. And part of that safety is actually really understanding the systems that we're in. So I have an amazing guest, David Rodriguez, who has a book we're going to be talking about. And this whole conversation is about the American education system. And you don't have to believe everything we're saying, but I invite you and encourage you to do your own research, to get David's book, and to really explore what our world is about, what the systems are about. And as always, at the end of this video, I'm going to share some insights that will help you bring everything together and allow you to start to live in this world the way the systems are, and having more freedom and more empowerment in and trust that things are going to work out and everything's going to be okay. So my guest today is David Rodriguez. David, welcome. I'm so excited to interview you today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Michelle. I love talking about freedom and the roots of the school system and empowering parents and children out there. So it's great to be with you.
Awesome. So let's start with your journey in finding this information. What was the seed or the inclination, that the catalyst that was like, whoa, something's not right, or I want to look deeper into the system, the educational system? What was your journey in finding this information?
I would say the ultimate history lesson was a 5-hour documentary interviewing this gentleman named John Taylor Gatto, and he was the New York State Teacher of the Year. He taught there for 30 years and just created a huge impact for students and for families. And so a gentleman interviewed him, and it was amazing. He's going into the depths of it. And as we listened to him for 5 hours, I said, wow, this is a really diabolical system. Some of you might not know it's a $700 billion a year business. Actually, it's a massive business, over 3 million staff members in the system. And I said, well, I was raised in a small town in public school, and I felt something was wrong in the school system. And turns out it's a factory system. And so once I saw that film, I said, wow, this is a big problem. And then I reached out to him because my original dream in this lifetime was just to make a lot of money, sit on the beach and have a good life. And then I found out, as I studied successful people, hanged out with successful people, they actually want to make the world a better place. They want to leave a legacy. They want to empower their kids or the next generation. And so I had a mentor, and I asked him, I'm looking for my purpose, or, bigger things than life. And he said, well, look for an injustice on earth and then spend your life trying to correct that injustice. I said, oh, okay, well, that makes better sense. And so after that documentary, I saw the school system as a complete injustice because it is harming children, and it's been designed that way. And so I reached out to John Taylor Gatto, made a relationship with him, got into business with him. I started something called the Education Options Expo, and this is where we explore respectful models of learning. That turned into a YouTube channel. I then ended up starting my own school where I can do accelerated graduations for teenagers. I also do consulting for parents, homeschool consulting, and really whatever I can do. And my recent project is called the Gatto Project, and it's an acronym which means get all the thinkers out of forced schooling. I think, God willing, I'll be able to spend the next 30, 40, 50 years of my life trying to remove as many children as I can from the system, because it's contrived, it's fabricated, superficial. But the world that we live in, it's abundant and vibrant and exciting and respectful, and there's human dignity. And inside those schools, which I called a day prison, just because they're mandatory attendance and you need permission to go to the bathroom and permission to drink water, and all these basic human rights and needs aren't acknowledged to the young kids, to remove as many children as I can from that system. And one by one, that's what I'm doing. And so we did this book, and we got some other projects in the pipeline, but really understanding where the system came from, where it's at now, where it's going, is very alarming. But parents out there can do a lot by just removing their children, learning some of these basics. And so that's kind of the short version of how I got started. And it just feels so good helping parents remove their children from this day prison.
I love that. So let's actually talk about the school system, when it started, when the system that is established right now, when it started, and why do you call it a factory system? So what is the history of the American school system?
So the American system was imported from Prussia, which is old Germany. And the reason it was imported from that country, because that country was a militarized nation, and they hired or they sold out their soldiers as mercenaries, and it was a very regimented country. And so they were very strong in battle and successful defeating other countries. And so Horace Mann flew over there, heard about the system, and he imported it. And it took him about 10 years to do that. They finally passed the first compulsory attendance school law in Boston, Massachusetts in 1852. And specifically, the reasons were to create obedient soldiers and compliant consumers, or consumers who don't have a mind to think, obedient clerks. You don't want, if you're running the business or an organization, you don't want insubordinate people who start questioning. You want people who just follow directions. And there's a great story of how this thing started in 1806, the Battle of Jena. And the Prussians lost to Napoleon's army. And so at the end of a defeat, you know, the leaders get together and the philosophers are like, man, how come we lost? And they concluded is that when we commanded the soldiers to march directly into bullets, they didn't. They thought for themselves and they ran sideways. And so in 1819, Johann Fichte, Fichte, a German philosopher, said we have to create a school system that destroys the free will inside the child. That way, when they grow up, they will never consider doing anything that their schoolmaster would disapprove of. And then he said, after a country has control of the school system for one generation, you won't need military and police to control the population, because they will control themselves. They will police themselves. And that's what we're seeing now after having, 3 or 4 generations in the US. And so that's kind of the amazing quotes. And these are all, I can send you some of the quotes. We put it here in the notes. So they said that's what it was designed for. And then little by little, I think it's by 1921, every state in the country had mandatory compulsory attendance laws. And then that's when Rockefellers got in and started funding the pensions and the textbook publishers and the architects. And it became a huge business that you would give out these contracts to people. And even Elwood P. Cubberley, the first dean of education in Stanford, he said the school should treat the child like a nail or a piece of wood that should be shaped and formed and fitted to fit into the current social system. So these are some of the quotes that are just so diabolical and in the book that we published. And so that's kind of the origins, and it's deeper and it's darker, but we got to come out of it so we can empower the people out there, because it's been going on for so long, over 100 years, and it's going to continue unless parents and grandparents and cousins and adults do something about it, and we can, and we're doing that, day by day.
So what is the name of your book?
The book is called The Underground History of American Education, and the author is John Taylor Gatto. I have a foreword by Ron Paul, and the subtitle is An Intimate Investigation into the Prison of Modern Schooling. And this is just volume 1. John Gatto wrote a few other books, Dumbing Us Down, Weapons of Mass Instruction, A Different Kind of Teacher. And so he dedicated his life to empower these people, these young children. And it's really amazing that he goes through and he gets these quotes, and he spent over 10 years researching and writing this book. It was out of print for 15 years, and it's actually a giant book in its original form, like this thick and like a big old textbook. So we broke it up into 3 versions, and we're working on the 2nd volume and the 3rd volume. And yeah, it's very digestible. There's new essays. Unfortunately, Mr. Gatto did pass away about 1.5 years ago. And so now the baton is in your hands and my hands and people out there that really want to help others understand where the system came from. Because if you understand what the origins and the purposes are, it makes understanding homeschooling and these other types of education very digestible. Because like, wow, if that's the purpose, and that's what we got right now, status quo, then almost anything, and that is my opinion, anything other than compulsory schooling is beneficial for the child and the family.
So let's go through understanding exactly what the system is. You call the American school system a factory system. So can you walk us through, like, when someone, when a child goes into kindergarten, like, how is it, when a parent is looking at the schooling system, how do they know this is a factory system? Because we have been living this for generations upon generations. So this is what feels normal to us. And that normalcy, a lot of times people think that that's right and that's the way it's supposed to be, and they have the best interest of it for our children at heart. So how can you actually look at the school system and see it as a factory system, and what does that mean?
Well, I define education as what we do to ourselves to create a good life. And I define schooling as what someone else does to you for their benefit. So before I get into the factory model, just imagine if McDonald's was in charge of the school system. What would the system look like? Well, we'd learn about the nutritious preservatives in McDonald's, and we see the pictures of the founder of the McDonald's on the wall. We say, yeah, those guys are great. And the ultimate goal would to become a McDonald's employee, or maybe someday we can become a McDonald's franchise owner. So whoever's in charge of the minds of the children, they have those agendas. And so because the state is in charge and they use compulsion, see, moral people like you, me, and your audience, we don't use coercion and compulsion. We use freedom and respect. So from age 6 to age 18, these children are put in these buildings by force of law, and then they're not even given freedom to study what they want. They're given a curriculum, which used to be a state curriculum, and now with Common Core, it's becoming a national curriculum. So more and more they become conformist, standardized, one size fits nobody, but that's what they're doing. They're forcing it on them, and they want obedient people so that nobody stands out. They don't want transformational leaders. They don't want people, amazing inventors, artists, orators, speakers. They want people to stay the same. And the factory model comes into play that you have bells every 40 minutes or an hour, and this is known to disrupt concentration. So people out there, when you get passionate about something, you get fully enthralled, 3 hours goes by like that. 5 hours, 8 hours goes by like that, because you're actually learning, you're fully engaged, your neurons are connected, your energy and spirit is there. But when you have a bell every 40 minutes and you need permission to go to the bathroom, it's like you're an employee. It's like you're working for somebody. And so they want to break up the concentration. They don't want you to develop your concentration muscle. And then they give you 5 to 7 different subjects a day where it's very unnatural, you know? So as you get enthralled in something, you want to study it, but it's, you know, language and math and science and all these things that you don't have interest in. Also, there's a gentleman from Harvard named Howard Gardner, and he talks about multiple intelligences. And I think he's up to about 9 types of intelligences. There's linguistic, musical, physical, spatial, interpersonal, intrapersonal, spatial visualization. And so he's identified these 9 types of intelligences. And I believe there's actually 7 billion types of intelligences. And as Gatto said, your education should be as unique as your fingerprints. So you are unique among 7, 8 billion people, as am I, as in your listeners. So how could anybody come and force me to study something that's relevant for me in my life? They don't know me. They don't know my past. They don't know my goals and dreams and ambitions and what I'm doing on this planet. So they treat you like a number. And that's why you get a student ID number, because they're tracking you and they want to look at your test scores and these kind of things. And then that's why they have the gifted program, the special ed programs, all these different classifications. These are basically labels they're putting you on, and then they can steer you in different directions in junior high school and high school, maybe direct you towards the military, or the guidance counselor recommends you for this thing. And so they start putting, basically determining or directing your future without your knowledge, without your parents' knowledge, because they have a corporate economy, you know. And this is, some of your audience members might know it though, 6 corporations controlled 95% of the media that we receive. So despite there being all these local channels, all these magazines, newspapers, 6 corporations control all that. So we have to learn to think for ourselves, because there is this more consolidation of central power and corporate capital, and they have plans to really enslave us with what's going on. And this is like the forced vaccines in California has been going on for 5 years. And that was one of the big things I said, wow, this is going to become a really important issue, let alone the poor curriculum, the sex ed, the lack of recess, right? You're 8-year-old boy and you get 15 minutes of recess a day. I mean, that is torture. So despite all that, then you put the forced vaccine issue into it and you're like, wow, I think our children are under attack. And that is true. Children are the most vulnerable people on the planet. And this is why I try to help parents, because I used to think as a homeschool guy or a school guy, I was working with kids, but the kids are easy. It's mom and dad who have their understanding of, well, I want to give my child an education. I want to provide for them. Well, as I just defined, an education is not something that I can give to you. You have to give it to yourself. You know, just like I can give you a gym membership, but if you don't go work out and do the exercise and fitness, that gym membership doesn't matter. So I can give you a library pass. I can give you access to all the great universities and all the great professors. But if someone's not interested in reading or exploring or being curious, then they've effectively been schooled. So those are some of the points about where it's going and how, you know, parents can think about this, because it's an amazingly huge problem. But as they start to see that, you know, we can understand that it is a factory. So it's difficult for parents, because sometimes they're two-income families. Some of them don't have confidence to homeschool, and sometimes private schools too much. So these are some of the challenges that we deal with. But if you can just discuss these things with your child, for example, like the bells. Bells are really easy because they're obvious, and there's no bells in real life, you know, unless you are at a factory and it's, you know, start time in the morning, start time in the evening, lunchtime. And so that's kind of the correlation for factories right there. But there's no bells in our life. We say, okay, we're hungry, get some food. Okay. And we go decide to do that. Or if you have different schedules, it depends. But I think the future is about understanding we're free human beings, whether somebody believes in God or nature or evolution, whatever. Like, learning to direct ourselves is the apex of an educated person. And that's another word for unschooling. And I just define that as 100% self-directed learning. You don't need a master with a whip saying, hey, it's time to read. Hey, it's time to learn. It's like, no, I'm a individual human. I'm a sovereign being. I own myself, and I'll decide when I want to do that. And the last little note here is that there's a film that I recommend. Anybody who's interested in respectful schools, it's called Summerhill 2008. It's about a school in England. It's been around for 100 years, completely voluntary school. And you bring your child there and they give you a menu and they say, hey, here's our menu of classes. Check off the classes you want to take. If you don't want to take any classes, no problem. We have 10 acres. There's a tree house out front. There's musical instruments in the barn backyard, and there's a bike ramp in the side over here. So go be a kid and go have fun. And then they're like, that's it? Yeah, that's it. So they play for the first, 2-3 years. And by the time they're 11 or 12, they start to get curious. And they look at the teenagers who are 13, 14, 15 in the laboratories or in the libraries. And they're like, what are you guys doing? And they get curious. And so that natural curiosity that we have as young people, it doesn't get squashed out in a voluntary school or a voluntary environment. Whereas in the compulsory system, it's squished out. That's why people hate school and they hate their jobs. Generally, 80% of people hate their jobs because it feels like a factory and you have no freedom.
That's so, so true. And there's a couple things I want to say about when you said that everybody learns differently. I have a friend of mine who pretty much failed in college and in high school. They thought he just wasn't smart, is what he thought. And so he actually decided at one point, he was out of college for a number of years and decided to go back, but he had this major fear. He actually remembers even he was going for the door in the community college, and he just remembered he was shaking so bad because he just thought he was dumb. Well, he actually went back to school and started teaching himself through YouTube channels, through visual, through different types of learning. He would take the subject and look it up online in different ways. He ended up becoming an A+ student. Like he got a scholarship to Davis. He's like so brilliant right now, and it's because he decided to take his learning on for himself and not do it the way that the regular school system was forcing him to do it, because it just wasn't working for him. So I love that you said that. And then the other thing around children being curious and how that's stomped out, it's like, yes, because they're in these tunnels. It's like, this is what you're going to learn. This is the other thing. This is the question I have for you. The grading system, A, B, C, D, E, F, D, whatever it is, A, B, C, to F, however it goes. And tell me about that, because I know that that equals also factory style learning. So what about the grading system?
Yeah, so grades, generally, this is how parents and educators, evaluate the intelligence of a child. And this is why I mentioned the 7 billion intelligences and 8 types of intelligences. I think it's really important that parents define what success is. So if I was consulting with you or one of your audience members about homeschooling, I'd say, hey, mom or dad, what do you desire for your child? And that normally, like, because that's a bigger question than, do you want your child to go to college, or what type of career do you want for your child? It's like, what do you desire for your child? And the most common answers I get, I want a happy child, I want a healthy child, and a child that grows into a productive adult. You know, that's it. So it's like, okay, so if that's your criteria, because that's beautiful, then let's focus on that. And instead of trying to say, okay, you have a GPA or SAT score of whatever it is, that's not how you evaluate intelligence. In fact, intelligence is very difficult to define, And so I would say, if you are moving towards your goals, that's intelligence. If you are moving away from your goals, then that might be anti-intelligence or stupidity. I mean, really, because it's your life, and I would have been prepared if somebody told that to me at age 12, but my parents did the best that they could. And I should say my mother was a public school teacher and my dad just worked in the parks and recreation, loving people, but not financially abundant and wealthy. They have the spiritual abundance was just as valuable, but we want to make some money or have a career and not be part of the factory system. So what's interesting is that a lot of entrepreneurs get like F's and D's and C's, and then like middle management's like B's, and then the really good clerks get A's. And it's like, wow, is it designed that way? Because yes, if you get those A's, generally you're very obedient or compliant. And if you're getting like a C or a D, then you're kind of a rebel and you're not turning in your homework or not doing these things. Well, if you go back to what success is, and one of my favorite definitions is a guy named John Wooden. He was the famous basketball coach at UCLA who won all these different championships in a row. Really great guy. He said, success is peace of mind, which is a direct result of self-satisfaction in knowing you made the effort to become your best. So I like that definition. You have peace of mind because you tried your best. You made your best effort, and nobody can ever say anything to you if you tried your best. And especially if it's something you're not interested in, like quadratic equations. Nobody ever needs those ever, And I remember taking pre-calculus in college even, and you're like stressing out, doing 2 or 3 hours of homework a night. And then when I tried to transfer from a junior college to a university, that 5-unit course didn't even transfer. So I wasted all this time for something I'm not interested in. And if I could have reverse engineered it and got some of these definitions I'm sharing with you, and find some mentors, that's what I would share with parents out there, is forget the grades, but think about the mentor of your child. So if they're interested in marine biology or engineering or whatever it is, look out for them and try to connect them with different mentors. And this is some of the services I offer. I have a Facebook group you can join for free called Apprenticeship Creators, and we go over some of these ideas. But education is all around us, and my school is called Valor Academy, and I got 2 principles that I run that school, and one is the world is the classroom, and 2, anything or anybody that you can learn from can be a teacher. So in some ways, you're my teacher. In some ways, teenage young boys or girls are my teacher, or my nephews, age 8 or 9 are my teachers. I'm a student of life, and I'm learning. And so it's all around us, and it can be humans or technology or devices or books. But if we open that up in what John Gatto calls open source, AKA unschooling, AKA self-directed learning, it's everywhere. True education is always around us. And one of the definitions I love of education, or the root of education, educo, means to draw from within, to pull out. So I believe, like Pablo Picasso, that every child's a born genius. Every child's a born artist. And the challenge is to keep them in that genius mindset, that curious place of mind of being, where they genuinely seek out the truth and seek out these answers rather than get squished and say, here's the answers to life, memorize this and you're going to be successful. It's like, that's not what life's about, man. Life is about creating yourself. You know, life is about defining what your values are, your standards and goals, and then going for it. And hopefully you have a network of support of people to help you when you stumble and fall, because in compulsory schools, they teach you that mistakes are bad and you should fear mistakes. But in real life, mistakes are a teacher. Mistakes give you the lesson. That's what you get scraped up and then you get a lesson from it. And you get scraped up again, you get a lesson from it. And then you can write a book, or then you can teach people, say, here's the lessons that I learned, so you don't have to do that. And that can get you money. I mean, you can be a teacher about these things. So everything's backwards in the forced school system, including the grades and how these ways, how they evaluate intelligence. And it's always a fun thing. If you're in a conversation with someone who's, you know, pontificated about this, you can ask them, how do you define intelligence? And then just watch them reel, because it's a very difficult question. If you think about it for a while, you might be able to come up with it. But as I mentioned before, moving closer to your goals seems to be an intelligent action.
So why do they have an evaluation system? Like what made them think of A, B, C, D and skip E and go to F? And it's like, why do they have the grading system that way?
So we have to understand that the state is organized crime. They use coercion, and you and I don't use coercion because we're not criminals. And so their agenda is to create obedient workers, military people. The U.S. is the largest military in the world by far, despite China having, you know, 4 times our population. They want consumers. So it's a very nefarious system, and they have the grades so that the children can learn to classify themselves, and then they want to please the teacher. Okay, so from a child's perspective, when the parent drops them off at the school, it's like, mom and dad support this and approve this. So whether you're in the 2nd grade or 4th or 5th grade, it's like, okay, my parents know I'm here. They brought me here. This must be a good thing. And this is where it gets slippery, because most parents don't know some of the stuff we're sharing about the original roots of the system and how they want to create obedient, dumbed down people for the military and these reasons. So for the grades, it's a way to have a reward, like the carrot and the stick. And this is what B.F. Skinner talked about, I think, in the 50s. But, you know, getting recess is a privilege, and getting detention is a discipline. And, you know, you get little tokens, and that's what the little charts are for, you know, on the wall. And, oh, Susie got 2 smileys today. Oh, Johnny got 1 unhappy face today. Or you get your name written on the board, right? These are all tools of mind control to manage the classroom. And I have family members who are teachers and principals in the system. So there's loving people in the system. However, they haven't defined what education is for them. They haven't defined what success is. They don't know some of the origins. So they're in the system, and now they have their own children to provide for, their own mortgage or shelter to provide. So they're in a difficult spot. They can't just quit their job and go start a new career. So they got to work within the system. So it's about managing the classroom, unfortunately. These teachers have anywhere between 100 and 150 students a day. So that's maybe 5 classes. You got to manage the kids in the classroom. You got to have seating charts with their names. Otherwise, they're not going to even know your child's name. So it's about classroom management. It's about social control, and obedience is what they're really after. Because when your child graduates at age 18, they get this piece of paper and says, you graduated, you know, you have a diploma. And they say, well, what are you going to do with your life? And you're like, my life? For the last 12 years, you were giving me the curriculum. You were giving me the books. You were giving me the assignments. So this is why it's so important for parents out there to really consider giving your child true freedom, so they have the atmosphere and the space to actually explore what they're interested in. Because we all know that school goes by very fast. You blink and you're in the 1st grade to the 6th grade to the 11th grade, and you're like, wow, that was fast. So we need that time to explore, like, our purpose, our dreams, our goals, our aspirations, our career, our contribution to the planet. All these things, we need time. And that time is stolen from us from age 6 to age 18. But I'd say most important is like age maybe 10 to 15, 10 to 16, where they're no longer a baby. But they're not an adult, but they're in this phase where they have a lot of energy. They have a lot of resilience and passion and enthusiasm. So that's a really important phase. But during that phase, what are they doing? They're sitting in classrooms, receiving paperwork from people who they'll likely never see again, from these teachers. Again, probably loving teachers, as I had loving teachers in my life, but they don't know what success is. They haven't achieved their dreams. They're not pursuing their goals. But it seems that life is a gift from nature, from God's or universe, and it's just squelched away. You know, they take 12 years of our life, and this is a different conversation, but about taxes, the IRS, they take a third of your wealth every year, which is effectively 4 months out of the year. So in a working career, so let's call it 45 years of working career, they steal 15 years of your life. The school system takes 12 years of a life. So that's 27 years the government has taken from you without your permission. So this is why I think the future is voluntary. And going forward, there's a concept called voluntarism. I've got a lot of hope in the last few years meeting other conscious people who they just want to be free. They don't want to use violence or coercion or intimidation on people. And it's all about consent. We don't use coercion. We use consent, voluntary relationships. And that's definitely relevant for children because they learn what they live. And this is why there is a lot of bullying in these schools, because they're treated very disrespectfully. And so if you treat it disrespectfully, then you're going to pass that on. You think this is the world that you live in, but it is a superficial world. It is a social control mechanism. And I should read you this quote because some of the quotes from the book are just so unnerving. And this is from 1901 from Edward Ross in the book Social Control. He said, quote, "Plans are underway to replace community, family, and church with propaganda, education, and mass media. The state breaks loose from church, reaches out to school. People are only little plastic lumps of dough." 1901, he said this. So this is, yeah, so this is just, I mean, it's 100 years ago, 120 years ago now. And so this is why I get so vocal about it and do what I can to thrash the school system, but without thrashing the people that are in it, because these are my family, these are people that I love. But true education is something that we do to ourselves, and schooling is what the state does to us. So I do think getting kids out is probably one of the best solutions that parents have. And again, we have to deprogram ourselves. This is something called deschooling. I'll give you the 5 phases of homeschooling, and I'll give it back to you here. The 5 phases of homeschooling is, first is forced schooling, which is default. 50 million children are in the forced schooling system now by compulsion of law. This next phase is called deschooling. This is when you remove your child from the school system and you give them freedom in your house to do whatever they want, to study what they want, learn what they want. If they want to sleep 15 hours a day, do that, because they've been under a lot of pressure. And just like when you shake a bottle of soda, you open the cap and all this pressure is released. So that's the same thing with our children. We take them out of the school system. We got to give them time to release, even if they're playing video games for 12 hours a day. The rule of thumb is that for every year your child was in the compulsory school system, you want to give them a month of total freedom. So if they're in the system for 7 years, they're in the 7th grade, give them 7 months of freedom. It's very difficult for mom and dad to let go of the steering wheel and say, okay, son or daughter, just play video games or sleep or whatever, but you want to help them become realigned with themselves. And so that's the phase called deschooling. The third phase is called school at home. And this is where I distinguish between homeschooling. School at home is when the parent buys a curriculum and says, okay, it's 10 o'clock math time, 12 o'clock language time. And they basically bring the school agenda from the school and they put it on the kitchen table and say, okay, we're going to do school at home. Homeschooling is when a leader creates an atmosphere where personalized learning can occur. And that's very close to unschooling. As I mentioned, unschooling is the apex or the goal of all learning, which is 100% self-directed learning. So I put those very closely, homeschooling and unschooling, and those are the 5 phases. So if you can go from the forced schooling system to deschooling very quickly to school at home, homeschooling, and then ultimately unschooling, generally it takes about 2 years. I've seen some parents do it maybe in like 6 months. And if a parent has been doing some of the research, they can do that maybe in 3 or 4 or 5 months, because it's just so stressful when everyone else is going to school, but you have pulled your kids out and you're doing something different. And this is where it comes important to like build a new community, build a new tribe, reach out to people, join these homeschool associations, go to these different conferences. There's a growing surge of homeschoolers and respectful, voluntary educators and schoolers growing because the school system is just so harmful to children. And if you can get to the unschooling or the self-directed learning piece faster rather than slower, I think it's going to be very smooth. And your child's going to love you. They're going to trust you. They're going to be learning, excited, and you guys are going to have a great relationship.
I love that. And I just want to say, like, I went through school and I was the first in my family to graduate from college. And I remember getting my BS, which actually cracks me up every time I say that. But so I went to the career fair and I was already a fitness trainer. I'd been teaching boot camp in the mornings at Stanford, actually, boot camp.
Nice.
But it was a total different company, not Stanford. But anyway, it was at Stanford.
Rikes?
So,
Was it Rikes?
it was called Time Out Services at the time. But then what happened was I went to this career fair and I looked all around. I'm like, there's nothing here I want to do. I'm like, why did I just spend 4 years of my life in college? I was like, I love teaching fitness. So I started my own business. I was like, I'm just going to do this because this is what I love to do. And so I love that you said, let your child find their spot, their passion. Because each one of us, it's not a mistake that each one of us is here at this time in history. It's not a mistake we're born to the people we're born to. There is a higher power in everything. And when we actually feel into our hearts, we're actually guided toward what we're supposed to be doing in life at this time. And that's why I love talking about this, because this is about freedom. This is about letting people learn about the system that is keeping us enslaved and hindering our children, actually keeping them as what you call factory workers, which is so true. I remember when my cousin graduated high school and his mother starts singing, "What are you going to do now? Taco Bell, Burger King." And it was funny at the time, but I'm like thinking, what is he going to do now? What does he like to do? I didn't even really know. And he probably didn't even know. So having said that, you have a system in place that can help people start learning more about how to unschool their children and how to get them so that they can be on the path toward prosperity and toward happiness and joy. Because I know that parents watching this, they want their children, number one, to be happy and healthy. And that's really and it's like I said, it's not a mistake that you're here at this time. Like something inside of you guided you to learning this information, to reading this book, and to being a part of the solution of this. Something guided me toward the passions that I like. So that is why each one of us is here. The whole idea of get a job, get a home, get married, and all of this whole system of the way things are supposed to go with the white picket fence, that's really made so many, kept us enslaved and stressed out, and having heart disease is the number one killer especially of women in the United States, and so many other moving us toward more disease. But when you're living a life of passion, you're doing what you love, that actually is really good for your health and your immune system and your livelihood. So where would parents start? You gave us a list of 5 steps, and you have a website. What was the name of that Facebook page? It was a Facebook page where people can.
So the first one was Apprenticeship Creators. That's a newer one. The one that I started, it's been over a year now, called Homeschool Leader. It might be close to a year and a half. Homeschoolleader.com, and working on that website. And then the group is called Homeschool Leader as well, helping parents homeschool successfully with peace of mind, because it is us, the parents, who have to basically deprogram ourselves of some of these things and find out. We really have to kind of do some inner work. So that's where you can find me. And then I also do, like I said, accelerated graduations with teenagers. So I've graduated. The youngest student I've graduated was 14, and she was so happy to graduate because she already had her dream. She wanted to open a dive shop in Belize and just was on fire. And her parent was like, "My daughter's brilliant and genius, but like the school system is just really violating her mind, So I said, we can do it. So 14, that's called Valor Academy. You can email me, info@homeschoolleader.com, and we can do consulting, or you can go to that group. And I'm working on some digital products as well, so we can get it out there, because it seems to me, Michelle, that in the fall, these forced vaccines or these social distancing or all this baloney that's happening, even if the virus was real, which it may be real, and there's, you know, people got harmed, but the overreaction of the government is a real alarming. So I think homeschooling is going to continue to increase in attractiveness and interest, and then parents are going to have to deal with like, oh my gosh, how do I do this? So feel free to reach out and join those groups. Right now, those groups are free. I think those groups will eventually become paid groups, so you can join for free. And now, you know, you're not gonna have to pay anything, but later on there will be paid there. So because we got to build it, and I need that capital to help fuel my business, and then kind of reinvest it so we can scale this up and make a bunch of cool media stuff. And I think that's the direction where we're going. And the world really is the classroom. So I hope parents can just take that one aspect away.
I love that. Homeschoolleader.com, and I'll put this in the information below the video. And is there any last things? And I just want to share one more thing. If for you who have children out there, and if your child has been in the schooling system for so long, I invite you to consider the possibility that you don't even know your child. Like, you don't even know the brilliance of that child without like just letting them be themselves and seeing their uniqueness. Because I know for me, you know, I was kind of what's called a latchkey kid, and I was, you know, the parents were always gone, and we were in school, and they always, you know, we did really well on our grades. We got, you know, certain awards and stuff like that. But my parents never knew that I was a speaker. You know, I'm an international speaker, and I've written my own book, End Dieting Hell, and they didn't know that. I didn't even know that about me. So I just invite you, as being a parent, take on, you know, go to these websites below and email David for some more information, and really explore, get curious about your child and what that unique being that you brought into the world, who they are, and what amazing things they're going to bring about into the world. They could be, you know, changing the world in a huge, huge way. And you're allowing them to do that by exploring a different way to educate your child, of freedom, and with understanding that who they are is absolutely perfect. They don't have to be this cookie cutter kind of factory molded person. So I invite you to consider that, and definitely check out David's site. David, is there any last things? I know you have 2 minutes left before you have to go, but is there anything, last things that you want to share?
Yeah, I want to share this great quote from John Gatto. He says, you either write your own script in life, or you become an unwitting actor in the script of someone else. So parents out there, you're still writing your script. I'm still writing my script. Michelle is, your child is. And so this whole life, this whole human experience is lifelong. So when you graduate, as I have a BS also, it's called the commencement ceremony. And so, you know, people throwing out their hat, they're, yeah, I'm finished. Commencement means to begin. So if you're just beginning at age 21, 22, it's okay if you're just beginning at age 32 or 42 or 62 or 82, because it's your mind that allows you to develop your fulfillment in life, your peace of mind, your joy. And that's what makes us human. And so if you can demonstrate that to your child will watch you and say, wow, that's what mom does. Oh, that's what dad does. So one of the best things we can do is to be a role model of learning for our child. So when they're looking at you, you're actually doing a project. They say, what are you doing? I'm doing a garden thing. I'm doing a book project. I'm doing dancing. I'm doing sewing, because you love it. And when you love it, that energy goes out to them. And sure, you got to maybe have a 9 to 5 temporarily or do your thing. But then when they see you doing your passion, doing something that's very interesting, they say, wow, mom is awesome. You know, she's like really dedicated. And then guess what? That gets infused to your child. And then pretty soon, the words that you say, they're going to start saying. And the attitude that you have, they're going to start having, because they're mirroring us. And so being a role model, I think, is essential. So I encourage you all to keep writing your script for peace and love and joy and success and contribution and growth and everything that's meaningful to you according to your values. And use consent. Don't force anybody to do something, especially the children. And I think we are going to win. Freedom is going to win. And it's, you know, one day at a time, 1 month, 1 year, and associate with like-minded people who support your dreams, who understand mistakes are okay. But being in despair and being self-loathing for too long is no good. Temporarily, we all get defeated. But hey, pick ourselves up hang out with people like Michelle and whatever she's got going on. It's really been a joy to speak with you about these subject matters, and hope to maybe talk to some of your audience members or yourself in the future again, as there's more stuff coming in the pipeline. And I think there'll be a lot of subject matter in the news in the next few months.
Absolutely. Absolutely. David, it was such a pleasure. And please, again, check out his website. Can you say that website one more time for us, David?
Yep, homeschoolleader.com. And you can see some stuff also at davidjamesrodriguez.com.
Homeschoolleader.com. Awesome. Much mahalo and aloha to you, David, and to you out there. Much mahalo and aloha. This world is changing. You are part of the change. Your child is part of the change. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time on Global Inner Wellness. Much mahalo and aloha.